Recently, the European Space Agency put out some studies that some people have been working on. And I feel so embarrassed as a European to see that they're just copy-pasting Starship and New Glenn. So it's like let's put the grid fins of this one or this, the bottom part. And you look like, we're not Chinese, right? Like, why do we do this? Like, we're falling so low.
Hello, everyone. This is the Space Cafe podcast, and I'm Marcus. I'd like to take you on a ride today to perhaps try to get a different look or take a different look on the space industry, because we're spoiled, or this is at least what the big players and the media are trying to do, to show us the success stories, to show how great and shiny everything is. But if we take a closer look, space is hard. This is nothing new, and space is a tough place to get at. And today we're looking at a company that makes no secret out of it trying very hard and struggling now and then. Because hey, everyone is struggling. Elon is struggling, but he just doesn't talk about it in this way. I'd like to put the light today on Zero to Infinity, a fantastically interesting company trying to get into space using high-altitude balloons for the first stage, and then once you're in a safe spot, you would launch, or they would launch, with regular thruster technology into wherever they want to go. A fantastic concept. They're not the only ones, but they are at the pioneering front of this technology. But they make no secret out of it how hard it is to get the funding, how hard it is to convince people that this may be the right thing to do for certain projects. This is not the solution for everything, but for certain projects, it's better than everything else on the market. So joining me today is the CEO of Zero to Infinity, José Mariano López Urdiales, a fantastic, charismatic character who very candidly talks about not only his company, but his vision, his dream, and how hard it is to make it a reality. And that's exactly what we need, don't we? Open, candid discussions about overcoming obstacles to achieve breakthrough solutions, because again, space is hard. José's journey is nothing short of fascinating, and I am truly excited to share it with you. So let's dive right in today. Welcome to the podcast, to the Space Cafe podcast. José, let's go.
So, is that your house? Are all those your books?
It's a good. It looks like a great wallpaper, but it's real. It's real books. But it makes books make living spaces even more alive. So I love books just for the vicinity, to be near them.
Yeah, I agree. When you step into somewhere and you see books that you own, it generates like a link.
A connection.
It feels welcoming. Yes, it does. Yeah, I can see that. And I try to keep that with my children.
You have 3 kids, so no time to read, right?
Oh, well, it's important that they see me reading.
Absolutely.
Like, it's always been important. So it's, there is time to read sometimes. But I must confess that I use a lot of audiobooks now.
Yes, me too.
Because it's convenient.
What book is on your nightstand right now?
Always with Honor, which is a biography of the last leader of the White Russians in the Russian Revolution. I'm reading it in English. My Russian is not good enough.
Tell me, José, you're now based in Spain, right?
Yes, I'm based in Barcelona.
Barcelona, fantastic. And you're doing something that, to be honest, this is now episode 121, and we have never talked about, even remotely, about such a topic, because it's very rare. How high can you go with a balloon? Where's the limit?
The limit, the higher you go, the bigger the balloon has to be. for the same payload. And there's a point in which all the buoyancy that the gas gives you is there to lift the balloon itself. So you have no suspended mass, no payload. So there's a limit like that. And of course, if you made thinner materials or stronger, thinner materials, you could theoretically go higher. The limit is around 50 kilometers, right? So, when you get to 50 kilometers, you're basically just lifting the balloon with a token payload of a few kilograms, with a camera or something. But that is not very helpful. Like there is nothing that happened particularly at 50 kilometers why you might want to go there. The interesting things happen around 20, around 25, and then around 30, 36, between that range. There's some astronomy missions that may require going to 40, but it's rare. So it really depends on what you want to do up there. And going higher than 50, as I said, is not practical with balloons.
So tell me, this is fascinating. So you say the interesting things happen starting at 20 and 30.
Yeah.
So what is interesting? Yeah. So we all know from airliners, from transatlantic flights, you're at around 10,000 meters. So if you double that, at 20,000 meters, what is different and why is that interesting?
So you're now deep into the stratosphere, which means that there is no weather, like there's no disturbance, there's no turbulence. It's like being on rails. So you get to a trajectory, you can very, very well predict where you're going. So on the way up, there can be noise, thermals, etc., turbulences, gusts. Once you get around 20, it's like being on rails, which means that you can predict trajectories extremely well, which is very helpful if you want to cover, for example, an area of interest. Let's say you want to take a picture of an oil spill. So you launch a balloon from a location and you know that there's going to be some noise, but it's going to spend very little time going up. And then once it gets to 20, as it drifts there, it's going to have a very, very predictable trajectory. So it's going to overfly the target that you want to, let's say, take a picture of. So that's one thing that happens at 20. Another thing that happens at 20 that is very, very interesting is that for most of the planet, the winds are very, very weak. They're not fast. So you launch, let's say, a balloon in the summer at 20 kilometers altitude in Spain. It can't stay for over a day within Spain proper. It won't drift very far away. And the closer you go to the equator, the longer they can stay. So you can have balloons staying over one country for weeks or months, without any maneuvering, just because the winds up there are very weak compared to higher or lower. So that altitude of 20 kilometers is super interesting. For example, when you want to build a business case that requires station keeping. For example, you want to monitor for fires. You want to have early warning of fires. Well, you don't want to put your balloon at 10 kilometers. It's going to go very far away. It's also going to cause all sorts of trouble with the airliners. As you mentioned, they fly in the same altitude. You want to cross that. But if you put them at, let's say, I can place it at 30 kilometers. So it sees a wider field of view. It sounds attractive. Oh, wider field of view. Yeah. Not so good because your balloon at 30 or 35 is going to be drifting pretty fast. So you will not be able to do station keeping.
Why is it?
But you can do it at 20.
Why is it drifting at 30, 35?
So this is quite complicated, but there's some dynamics of the temperature and the pressures and the airspeed of the atmosphere. And it so happens to be that around 20, you got a local minimum of wind speed. But if you go farther than that, there's also something at the lower altitude. There's something interesting also that as you go up, the temperature of the air gets colder, but then there's a point in which it starts getting warmer. As you go up. But that is less helpful that happens lower altitudes. But yeah, for practical purposes, if you want to stay over one target as long as possible, you want to be at 20. But if you want the view, if you want to have the incredible view of your blue planet, the black sky with the stars and planets and seeing hundreds of kilometers in every direction, seeing that the Earth is curved and the thinly blue layer of the atmosphere, then you want to go higher, because at 20, about half of the sky is going to be black, but the other half is going to be like deep purple. And you don't want that. Like, if you're a space tourist, you want the view. So you still need to go a little higher.
It's really interesting. Really interesting. It's sort of the calm before the storm. I mean, like, first you have the storm, and then you have the island, a calm island, and then you have the storm again. I love that.
Yeah.
How long can you stay up there with a balloon? I mean, like, would you have to refill after a certain time?
Well, the longest that a balloon has stayed, I think it's over a year on those altitudes.
Wow.
And it's a question of quality control of the material and the seams being perfect. There's a lot of research and development ideas that have not received capital that could increase the stay of a balloon up there close to 5 years. Wow. But those things, they don't really make sense to try them right now. If there is, what happens with balloons and a lot of new space sector is that there are cool ideas out there that require research and development that can extend capabilities, but obvious brick and mortar ideas that could have been implemented almost 50 or even more years ago are not being funded. So why develop something that is very, very advanced and impressive if things that we already know that work are not being funded? So that's an interesting gap there. So yeah, you could stay over a year, but why would you want to do that? And if you stay a year, you're gonna drift. That's for sure. You're gonna maybe go around the world, maybe several times, and that causes all sorts of issues with overflight rights, etc. And but yeah, you could stay very long up there. You don't refill. You just keep your helium there, or your hydrogen if you're using that as a lifting gas. We can get into the pros and cons of both later. But for many applications, you just need to get out of the thick soup of air that we have above for a small amount of time. Like, for example, if you wanted to reach orbit with a balloon-assisted launcher, you only need to cross to a certain altitude. And there, the sweet spots is around 25. That's something that we've looked at in great detail as well. Designing a satellite launcher for sea level has some cost and complexity. If you go higher, up to 25 kilometers, there is a dramatic reduction in the cost and complexity of your launcher. But launching it from 30, let's say, or 35, not much gain. The sweet spot is around 25 for that kind of capability. And that has to do with again, many things about how we build rockets and how we design them. But for some of the listeners that may be familiar with the concept max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. Mm-hmm. So basically, when you launch from 25, you know that maximum dynamic pressure is not going to be a parameter in your rocket design. Mm-hmm. The biggest limitation, the moment that most people are worried about when they're launching a new kind of missile or ground-based satellite launcher is when they go through max Q, which is when the force on the rocket is biggest. If that stops being a requirement, you liberate your design space. Mm-hmm. And that's the advantage of launching from a high altitude balloon or reaching these 25 kilometers. It is not like a lot of people say, oh, but you're saving on propellant. Oh, you have extra energy because you need to. No, those things are there, but they don't matter. They don't matter at all. What matters is capital required to get to a first set of launches, and how your ride to orbit is going to be a different one from that.
So so you're taking You're taking the first 20, 25 kilometers out of the equation of traditional space launching methods. You're taking it out of the equation because you're substituting a traditional launcher with a balloon. And then you're going into the traditionally propelled space.
Yes. And the thing is, those 25 kilometers are associated to maybe 65 to 70% of the real cost of a launch into orbit. And why is that? Imagine the spaceport. Okay, you need the spaceport. What is a spaceport? Well, there's a lot of equipment and facilities and also land. So you need to have land that is close to the sea. People like to live in land close to the sea. Mm-hmm. They like to have condos and apartments and shops and IKEAs and things. So, but you can't have any of those because you need to have a very, very long piece of coastline just for you. And how are you going to make enough money launching things into space to compare with the money that you could get by using that asset in a more economically effective way? It's unimaginable. So that's why. That's one of the reasons why satellite launch is a strategic capability of governments. It's not a commercial service because you have an asset there, sitting there, that is not generating almost any money compared to what it could generate in some other way. And you can say, oh, you can go and build your launch space somewhere desertic where there's nothing on the coast. Well, there are not many coastlines that have nothing. Most of the coastlines of the planet are populated. But if you have to generate a city in a place that has almost nothing, and we've done this, we know how this works. France did it in Kourou. It's even more in capital intensive because you need to generate a city with the schools and every hospitals and all the things that you need for the people that work there in a very remote area. So there is the only way to solve for that is to either launch far away from people and property, or get to a point where you can have these kind of activities and in the middle of a populated area. And we're not yet there. We don't have the reliability for that. So when we launch from, or balloons launch from a boat, for the satellite launch line of business, you would launch from a boat or more aptly, a floating barge that is towed by a boat. So you have just your equipment there in the sea. And you don't need to own all that strip of land. So that's a huge amount of money that most people don't pay. Like SpaceX is not renting the land in Cape Canaveral. Like the government considers that what they do is of value and they let them use it. But the moment that the government, and I really don't like to be dependent on a government deciding if you have, if you can use this or that, right? That's not how commercial space is going to be whenever it really becomes, truly commercial, which is not yet there, but we're making the little baby steps. So the other thing that you don't have to do is the most capital intensive part of a satellite launcher, is the engines, and within the engines is the turbopump assembly. Is the thing that sucks propellants out of the tanks and pump them to such insane pressures so that they can go inside the thrust chamber. And that's very hard to do and requires a lot of skilled engineers and testing, and it's really difficult. You don't need that if you're launching from 25 kilometers. Because basically, the vacuum of space, which you are very close to, is sucking the propellants out of the tanks through the engine.
Interesting.
So, and you say, yeah, but you will not get to the chamber pressures that our friends at SpaceX get, like 100 bar, whatever, 170 to 750 bar. Well, the number that is relevant for a rocket, for its efficiency, is not actually the chamber pressure, the atmospheres of pressure in the rocket chamber, but that divided by the atmospheric pressure. So, because the atmospheric pressure is 1 bar, 1 atmosphere, we always take for granted that there is a divided by 1. And we say, 100 bar, 150 bar, pushing the limits of what's achievable. Amazing. Well, but there's a cheaper way to do that. Is lowering the exit pressure. If you lower the exit pressure, the quotient, the ratio between the two is the same. And you can reach crazy high numbers by just lowering the exit pressure. And you do that by going up very high, because your pressure can be a small fraction of ground sea level pressure. And that's how you get that number high. And you suck out the energy of your propellants. So there are things like that, that are important. And also, going to space traditionally is a very shaky activities.
Yeah.
You turn on the engines, shockwave goes to the ground, comes back up all through the rocket stack with vibrations, noise. Also, the separations are violent. When you go through Mach 1, transonic, supersonic, all those phases are a mess. And that's why satellites need to be tortured in tables and different things to see if they're going to make it. And that is just not there when you're launching from 25 kilometers. The sources of shocks, vibrations, sounds are mostly gone. Of course, there's still the combustion in the rockets. But again, that combustion is a lower chamber pressure, so it doesn't generate as many vibrations as on a ground level launch.
Jose, you're almost making. By the way, can you tilt your camera again?
Sure.
For
down.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. You're almost making traditional, or almost making Starship and Falcon and whatever sound brute force, and what you are doing is more the elegant way, but it sounds really interesting.
I would not dare to do that. It is. Let me explain. So there's another physical thing that has to do like another limit. Like, you may wonder, well, if this is so smart and so good, why don't everybody use it? Like, why wasn't it used since the 50s? When the first rockets were launched from balloons, just before NASA was created, between Explorer and Sputnik, between the first American and first Soviet satellite, that's when Van Allen, the guy of the Van Allen belts, was having fun launching rockets from balloons. So these advantages are extremely important, especially for lightweight payloads. When you want to maximize, let's say, the resolution of a 100-kilogram satellite, the resolution of the pictures that a 100-kilogram satellite can take is directly correlates with the surface area of the mirror that you're putting on your satellite. So if you put like Planet Lab, like 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter, 3 unique CubeSats, your mirror is going to be very tiny. But if you have a very, very large mirror, it's either very heavy, so it doesn't fit into the 100 kilograms, or it's very thin. You can make a mirror very thin, but then it's going to shatter to pieces in the launch. So you can, so for things like that, these very, very small payloads, this way of reaching orbit is efficient. But there is also a point at which you would have to have a crazy big balloon, and then it's not practical anymore. And this happens fairly quickly. Like, I have to say that what doesn't quite make sense to reach orbit are micro launchers. And we're seeing this. Like, all the companies that started making a conventional micro launcher are either going out of business, moving to missile defense or ballistic work, or just going directly to a larger thing like Rocket Lab with Neutron. And this was completely predictable from the outset, because really developing a turbopump or a turbopump solution for a small thing is as expensive as making it for a large one. It's like making a Swiss watch. Like, the mechanism of a Swiss watch, if it's a lady's small watch or it's a gentleman's gigantic thing, it's the same. Okay, the cost of the gold or the materials is there, but the engineering to make the mechanism is the same. It doesn't, your computer simulations, they don't care if you're launching 100 kilograms or 10 tons. And so balloons, there's like a cutoff around a few hundred kilograms in low Earth orbit when balloons stop not making a lot of sense. And the thing is, when we think of micro launchers, we have to see where they're coming from. They're coming from ballistic missile work. They're coming from the V2, from the Semyorka in Russia, from all those things. So, or the Scud missiles, for example, the famous Scud missiles of Gulf War I. So if you add a second stage to the Scud missile, you have a conventional micro launcher of the ones that we have today. And those things are designed for either conventional or nuclear warheads, which are, like, if you've seen one, it's like the most compact object that you can imagine. It's really compact and hard and sturdy. So, because also it has to, because it's going on a steep re-entry trajectory, so it's going to be suffering crazy G-forces and heating. And so it's an extremely sturdy thing. It's like the opposite of a satellite. A satellite is something that you want it to be large and fluffy and, having lots of surface area, because that's what makes it valuable. It generates power, surface, solar panels. It dissipates heat with its radiators. It has resolution, whatever. Any meaningful metric of the satellite is going to be 2D related. It's going to be related to the surface. Whereas, this offensive weaponry is the opposite. It's like really compact, tiny thing. And if the thing has to survive re-entry, to attack the factory or the command and control center, whatever you want to target, or the military grouping, whatever. So it has to survive that. Then the requirements for the re-entry are so much more difficult to meet than launch. Then they don't really care about how violent the launch is. And that is why we launch things in such a violent way, because they were not designed for satellites. Or people. They were designed for warheads, and warheads anyway had to meet these horrible criteria going down. And so that's, but most people are not aware of that. They just copy paste. Okay, this is how we do it. We just keep doing that. And that's unfortunately how most of the industry is being operating. Starship is, so Falcon 1 is about the limit of the payload into orbit that makes sense with a micro launcher. And of course, it wasn't viable. They had to move on for larger things. So I believe that the only kind of micro launcher that can be viable is balloon based. But nobody's actually developing. I mean, we got to a certain point, and we can talk about that, but we are lacking funding, so it's not happening.
What's the cost ratio between a micro launcher and a balloon technology?
So this is a difficult question.
Maybe I'm not talking about the finished products. I'm not yet talking about my kilogram payload ratio between the two technologies, but also like development and
So typically to develop a micro launcher, you're going to need a couple of $100 million. Okay. That's it's, and this repeats itself. Like this is what's happened to Rocket Lab and ABL and Astra and all these people. Most of them have raised significantly larger amounts. So we believe to make a satellite launcher using a balloon as a first stage or zero stage, if you will, it's in the ballpark of 100 or 120 million euro, with including 4 orbital trials and stressing the financial model quite a bit. So it's the less capital intensive way to reach that point. So, but it's not magic. Like if I raise 10 million, I'm not going to be able to reach orbit as much as much as this. Like there are minimum amounts, and this is mostly cost of the team. Okay, so you need a minimum size of team to do things right, and that is again being repeated different times when companies have raised. Europe is currently trying to make 5 or 6 almost identical missiles. Like from Germany, there's a couple of them. France, there's 2 or 3. In Spain, there's a couple too. And in the UK with Orbex and Skyrora and all this, like everybody's trying to do a Scud with a second stage. We know the economics of that. We have already failed at that. We know the economies of scales when they apply. They're doing this because SpaceX did first the Falcon one. But that's not how you win. You win by doing things that other people don't know are smart, and you take advantage of that. You don't win by copying. That's not how the V2 appeared. And Starship is super interesting because it's very, very large. And, when you look at our patent for a balloon-assisted launcher, or the little prototype that we've flown, or all those things, they don't look like a stick, right? They don't look like a pen, because they don't have to. Like when you are above max Q, you no longer have to be thin and slender.
This shape, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This shape, so you can have a shape that is more compatible with lightweight tankage, and also much, much better for re-entry and reusability. What's good to go out is bad to come back. Or vice versa. So if you want to go out, you want to be very heavy and very compact and very slender, so that the atmosphere doesn't kill you. If you have to face the atmosphere. If you don't have to face the atmosphere, you just don't care about that. You just design something that extracts maximum energy out of your propellants and is more easy to manufacture and reuse, etc., and handle. So to go out, you want to be thin and slender, but to come back, you want to be like a parachute. Because things literally come back from space. People come back from space in parachutes. So what's a parachute? Like very large surface, very little mass compared to the surface. So ballistics that are going to slow you down. Or if you are, like the belly flop maneuver, they come back to maximize it. You want to maximize your area against the flow, to come back and slow you down before you burn. So our design of Blue Star, has a first stage that is a donut. And a donut, when it's coming back from space, looks like a gigantic sphere towards the flow. So it's like very fluffy. So this makes reusability easier and so on. And there's also a point at which, and this nobody's exploiting it, and we've done a little bit of work on that. There's a point in which, when you get very, very, very large in mass, like let's say you're launching 50 tons or something like this into orbit, then you no longer need to be that pointy again. And then because you can think of it the other way around, also for things coming from space. So imagine you have a grain of sand like coming from space. When you are in the forest at night and you see a shooting star, that's most likely like a little grain of sand coming from space. So that little mass, it's just gonna burn, and it does. But if you imagine something like what killed the dinosaurs, or something that is like a building, maybe the surface is going to get scratched a little bit, but it's not going to be slowed down significantly. It's going to hit the ground with its kinetic energy. So there's a point on which something is very, very big and very dense and massive, coming down, the atmosphere doesn't do much. So this is also true the other way around. So when you get to super heavy launchers, we still make them thin and slender, like Starship, and they have their reasons, but they wouldn't have to be, because the atmosphere is not that important. And we were getting there with the Energia rocket. The Soviets were getting there. The Energia, you look at the Energia and it's like a fat thing. And you could look at the space shuttle, and again, okay, it's also like a fat thing. But there is a point in which the extra efficiency of your tankage, and the fact that you don't need super high bays, and you don't need this, and it's not going to tilt on the side if it falls wrong. You don't need the best chopsticks are no chopsticks. Yeah. It's something that lands and it's not going to go on the sides. So that is actually the way that I anticipate super heavy things will look like once the dust is settled, and once the market somehow, if there's ever a market, sorts out winners and losers.
As as far as I know, the problem with the chopstick solution was the weight problem. So they had to get rid of the launching parts, the landing parts on the Starship because
The landing legs.
the landing legs for weight problems. So this is what I heard, and this is why they said, "Hey, no landing legs like the Falcons, so we need something else."
But it's also, but you still need, like if your center of gravity, I mean, if you can fall on your side, you need something. You can have legs, you can have chopsticks, you need something to make sure. But imagine something that can't, like the lunar lander, okay? The Grumman lunar lander of the Apollo missions. That can't really fall on its side, right? Of course, it has big legs.
Yeah.
But
it did in what was it called? For All Mankind? It almost capsized.
That's right. Yeah. That's a great show. That's one of the most accurate
fantastic, wasn't it?
Depictions. Yeah.
Tell me,
super fun.
Tell me, Jose, now you're sort of competing against the micro launchers. Then what is the upper limit? So I guess like the answer is up to you, but you're not competing against a Starship because you're not competing against 100-ton payload launcher. So you're taking everything underneath that. Or give me a ballpark.
So Blue Star, which is the system that we first proposed and we introduced, and it's for things that are around 50 to 100 kilograms in low Earth orbit.
Yes,
and that is the range of masses that makes sense for first balloon launcher. There would be a Blue Star XL that could do around twice that, but again, for much heavier payloads, you need to get into designing new kinds of balloons and things like that.
They're getting too big.
Exactly. We do have, we almost never talk about this because if people say, oh, if your company can't even raise enough money to send a couple of people up for first human flight, why would you be talking about a super heavy launcher? Well, it's the same kind of thinking that goes into figuring other ways of doing things can also be applied to the problem of heavy launch. Like there is not a requirement that you build a micro launcher first to do a heavy launcher second. Like I had a conversation once with the head of CNES of the rocket propulsion and part of CNES some years ago. And I back then what we call super heavy and Starship was called the BFR for Big Falcon Rocket.
Yeah.
Or you can change Falcon for some
exactly. This is I for the first time I heard it's Falcon. I thought it was the other one that we cannot pronounce on here.
Yeah. So I had this conversation with this guy. He had just made a wonderful presentation of how they had so much research and development. They were even looking into antimatter propulsion. Okay. Antimatter propulsion.
Wow.
They had done some studies and some people got paid to work on that. Out of taxpayer money in France.
Wow.
So then I say, oh, if you've looked into antimatter propulsion, you must have looked at your own BFR, meaning big French rocket. And they looked at each other, these people, and they were like, no, we don't think that's ever going to happen. We don't think that makes any sense. That was the level of delusion with the SpaceX, and this is not that long ago. This is maybe 2018, I think, 2018. But yeah, I have a design and I work with people in the industry and outside of the industry of how Europe could actually make something that is more competitive than Starship. It is absolutely possible. I haven't seen anybody talk about this. I haven't put out, like, I have papers written and everything, but I hesitate to put them out. But it's absolutely possible, and it doesn't look like anything like what people are proposing. Like recently, the European Space Agency put out some studies that some people have been working on, and I feel so embarrassed as a European to see that they're just copy-pasting Starship and New Glenn. So it's like let's put the grid fins of this one or this, the bottom part. And you look like, we're not Chinese, right? Like, why do we do this? Like, we're falling so low. There are a lot of very talented designers in Europe, not just ourselves, that have effective ideas of things that make sense. I'll just say one of the many ways that this can be done. You see, we build ships in Europe. We still build ships in Galicia, in Spain. They're wonderful places. And so this kind of sheet metal work and working with steel and those kinds of things in plates, the manufacturing capabilities is already in place. And it's being used, for example, for electric windmills. So, and if you build that in a shipyard, you can take it very easily to a launch site through the sea. Okay. So we have that capability. They need work. Put two and two together. And that's just one example, one specific, very visible thing, which is the tankage. But there are other things like that we have capabilities that the USA doesn't have and that we could apply to make very, very cost effective, heavy launch systems. I worked on the Ariane 5 launcher on a modern version of it back in 2001 and 2002. I lived in Paris and I worked in Les Mureaux where they assembled these things, put them together, the cryogenic tanks. And back then, Europe had like 65% of the commercial launch share. Like, we were killing it. We had by more than half of the commercial market of satellite launch. Wow. And those fundamentals that made Europe be the leader are still there. The cost, the geopolitics, the IP, the universities, the fundamentals are still there. Had it not been had SpaceX not succeeded, we would still have 80% or something like that, or 70% of launch capability. And it wouldn't be hard to catch up. Like when I was working there were people with ideas of reusability, etc. Even right now, but unfortunately, Europe is deciding to fund the continuity of things and obsolescence. But that's a political decision. Like it could be reversed.
Do you think that I completely agree with you? Completely agree. Do you think that as von der Leyen proposed a CERN for artificial intelligence in Europe, is this maybe a first step toward what you are envisioning when it comes to European self-conscious boldness in developing or in taking their technological leadership into their own hands?
Well,
I wouldn't say I evenly.
It sounds good.
Yeah,
it sounds good. I'm afraid that most of what I see coming out of the European Commission is headlines, and I believe that the maladies of Europe are more related to financial considerations than. So having like a CERN-like thing for artificial intelligence, maybe, but how do you measure if it's good or not?
Yeah.
Being a little bit familiar with the R&D side of things in the other side of the Atlantic, I studied for a couple of years at MIT and got grants from there. So there, it really the Pentagon is what's driving innovation there.
Yes.
Historically. Okay, there's a lot of waste and etc. Maybe it's going to get sorted out with Dodge, but we don't have anything like that here in Europe. We completely lack that.
Yeah.
So for the Pentagon, there are some metrics like, your battery is less heavy and carries more energy. The soldier can walk further. I mean, there are things that you can measure against. I don't see those in the things like framework programs or Horizon and all that. It's just, okay, you give some money, figure it out, we'll see. There is no end user. But there could be. We could do things because we have such huge demand. Our market is bigger our population is larger. The amount of people that are smart of that population is larger still here in Europe than in North America. So we could, of course, we could be doing great things. But what I see is that the application of capital, both private and public budgets, doesn't go to things that can give it an edge. So either it goes to very conservative, obsolete things, or goes to the European copy of what America is doing, or things like that. There's, whereas in places like China that seem to be more sovereign, they do apply things like the great graduates of China, they stay Chinese. They no longer need to come here or to America. They stay there because their opportunities are there. I lectured at the UPC, the Polytechnic University of Catalonia, lecture a few years. And my most brilliant students are overwhelmingly American now. Okay. Because they saw the writing on the wall and they were like, okay, yeah, here I can have great ideas. I can be super hardworking. There are no companies here that can thrive where I can have a career and do meaningful stuff. Because the companies that get funding are boring and the companies that are not boring don't get funding. So they just go to America and they end up working at SpaceX or JPL or places like that. And what's interesting is they can't come back legally because, America makes it illegal for high-end professionals to leave because of what they call ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulations. So, the brain drain is permanent. The brain, so the brains that go from Europe to America if you're just making user interfaces for apps, then it doesn't matter. You can come back, nobody's gonna care. But if you're doing anything cutting edge, quantum computing, AI, advanced, really serious AI, or rocket propulsion, or guidance of things that fly higher than airplanes, or things like that, I'm sorry, if you go to America, it's a one-way train. You can't come back legally. This is something that is selectively enforced. Okay. So yeah, you can say, but some people came back to China, some people came back to Europe. Well, until they want to charge you. So it's selectively enforced. So we should do a better job at generating professional opportunities here, real ones, not just lines. So that the brain pool that we have here stays and creates value here. And I think,
No, go ahead.
So go ahead. Yeah. No, I think there is a little, at least on X, which is becoming a bit like the public square. I think there is a little bit of a higher sensibility to these things, at least in the younger generations here in Europe. Like, hey, why are we not catching up? I see a little bit of a change that I didn't see, let's say, in 2009 when I founded Zero to Infinity at all. So that might be a positive thing, but the change needs to be quite significant.
Do you need? This is highly problematic what I'm saying right now. But do we need someone like someone who sweeps through Europe like what Donald Trump now wants Elon Musk to do with the American governmental structures, sweeping through those structures? I'm not advocating for it because I personally think you cannot take market logic and apply it to governmental structures. This shouldn't happen. The basic idea is interesting, but maybe I'm just wanting to put that up for debate with you. Would we need someone sweeping through Europe and decluttering our structures and minds, maybe?
So let me put it this way. You either do it yourself or they're going to do it to you.
Yeah.
So either Europe gets its act together, or
someone else will.
or Han overlords from China will do it for us.
Yeah.
Like I tomorrow I have a meeting with a big Chinese conglomerate. Okay, we're gonna be talking about this, and the infinity here of Zero to Infinity, it's also a number 8. as deference to what's been historically the main power in humanity, which has been China. It's a very strange exception that, since the century of humiliation up to now, like they're catching up again. But for most of civilized history, China has been the leading civilization, not Europe.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for us, but I also recognize how they are important, extremely important. And the thing is, the Chinese want a Europe that works. They don't want Zimbabwe in Europe, okay? They do not. For aesthetic purposes. Because they come here and they want to shop in Champs-Élysées and they want to visit our historic buildings because they value them and they think our culture is really cool and our kings and our stuff. So they're going to keep that alive. The question is if they will... So we either get our act together ourselves or they will just keep it alive, like when we go to the US and we visit the reservations of the Indians, so we don't know if we have casinos or not, but like they really don't have any qualms about this. Like they want that there are still continental philosophers like your wife, Like they value that. They want to have Europe still making those kind of thoughts. So, but this is not something that Europe itself has been allowed to value for the longest time. So that I think there are only two ways in which Europe gets its act together. Either internally with somebody sweeping and solving things, but in a positive way, not just cutting, not just caring, but or they do it to you.
Yeah.
And
completely.
And I think the Chinese would know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Here.
Why are you still in Europe?
Because well, I have 3 kids here. Okay. So I want to be next to them. That's very, very important. Personal reasons. Also, I like the way we do things. I think, and I'm optimistic about us. Also, for me to start my company in America, I would have to start with a 5 to 10 times bigger chunk of money, because the initial costs are higher.
But so are the returns.
Yes, true. But the fundamentals are good here. You see, labor costs are low. Regulation is actually not as bad as people think. Also, you see, I've always thought that this is something we haven't spoken much, but it's really important. I think the human part of the human part of the space experience is important. I want to take people up where the sky is black. I want to take people where the sky is black and they can see that we come from a blue planet that is not flat Earth. And
you're paid for saying this.
Sorry?
You're paid for saying this.
Yeah. That's right. I get that a lot. That somebody's paying me to have an opinion. Yeah, but I never get the checks. I only get cookies when I go on a website. But anyway, so what I was saying is that Europe, for space tourism and for ultra high-end engineering, has a lot of positive fundamentals. Let's say, for example, tourism. So space tourism, what is that associated with? Well, extra high-end experiences. So that's like a very high-end stereo system or a very high-end car with incredible engineering, minute attention to detail, or a handbag that is made from certain leather that is done in a certain way. So it's luxury. And the luxury is European. Most people don't know that here in Europe, but everybody outside knows it.
Interesting.
If you ask a Chinese that is a wealthy family or whatever, the successful entrepreneur there, okay, what's the brand of handbag that you're gonna buy to your daughter, your wife? It's gonna be European brand. If you ask them, oh, you want a super high-end stereo system, it's gonna be a European brand. Some that most people don't know. It's not American. It's not Chinese even. It's not Japan has a few high-end things, and this is because we have kept continuity with our past of royalty and aristocracy and all those things. They value this a lot, even the members of the Chinese Communist Party. Like they say, oh, Hermes, they used to make like, stuff, for riding horses in the nobility in France. Oh, that's really important for them. Extremely important. So the storytelling of luxury, the attention to detail, all those things are here. They're not in America at all. Like what made America very, very important was democratizing things. Was like, okay, the Model T, you can work on the car and you can drive the car, that you can buy a car if you can manufacture it. That dynamic. Well, I'm sorry, but we're not yet there in the space sector. And that was America in the 1950s. Doesn't look at all like America now. So, but we're still making luxury things. Like most of the luxury market is European, and space tourism is a luxury. You don't have to do it. It's 10,000 times more expensive than an alternative vacation that you can still do. And things that are 10,000 times or 1,000 times more expensive than the cheapest option are only made in Europe. So it's an anomaly that it happens in America. And actually, when you look at it, like who has sold the most tickets? They're not the most successful. They'll probably be delisted very soon. But Virgin Galactic is the one that has sold the most tickets.
Interesting.
And what is it associated with? Sir Richard Branson. Sir.
Yes.
Old world.
Yeah.
If you had a space tourism company marketing the same design, same vehicle, but it was called JetBlue Galactic or Southwest Airlines Galactic, nobody puts any money. They don't sell a ticket. Okay. So it's Europe where it happens. The first space tourists lifted off from Asia, from Kazakhstan, but it was European design. And so a lot of the initial team of SpaceX building the Dragon and the Falcon 1 are Italian, a bunch of Germans. Okay, Elon Musk, he's African. Okay, but he looks European. I'm sorry. Like, you don't have to do 23andMe. So this is where these things come from. And it does make sense to think that they will happen here. Also, and about space tourism, if you're not doing orbital, if you're doing orbital, you go around the Earth, so you see everything. That's great. But if you're doing suborbital, where you're going up, staying either a few minutes, as you would on a rocket, or a few hours, as you would do on a balloon, hours is better than minutes, you only see one area. You only see a cone underneath you, okay? So you want that area to be as diverse and cool as possible, and also not cloudy. This is something very, very important for scaling space tourism. If you want people to fly and they go and they say, oh, I just saw desert, or I just saw the most boring landscape, or I just saw green, a coastline and blue. Well, what is the area that astronauts say is more diverse when they fly into orbit? It's the Strait of Gibraltar. That's where we fly. Because you got Africa and Europe. Just like humans or hominids left Africa into the rest of the world, you are leaving your planet to the unknown of space, and that's highly symbolic. And seeing the Strait of Gibraltar works really well on a mind level like that. I mean, it's not like you see 2001 and the first scene, you have the hominids and then it jumps to the moon. Like these things are extremely important in the mind of the space tourism customer. So you see also the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, desert areas in Almeria, and in Africa you see the Atlas and Sierra Nevada, and you see swamp areas like Doñana and forests. So it's a little bit of everything there. A little bit of everything. Also, it's almost never cloudy. That's why people go to Marbella. It has the kind of amenities that you need for ultra high net worth individuals. Like if you go to New Mexico to fly with Virgin Galactic, there is nothing else to do. You can do the Breaking Bad tour. But there is no wonderful things to visit. So Spain has everything. Spain is the second most visited nation in the world, and it's probably the number one for the segment of ultra high net worth individuals. We have people from the Gulf states to Latin American wealthy people to Northern Europeans to Eastern European, you name it. They all come here. So we might as well offer them these kind of flights. It's much better than making them go to somewhere boring like Florida, where you just see green and the sea and the weather is often is really bad. And that's all you see. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so I'm bullish about Spain and about Europe. Of course, I have plan B, plan C, and etc. But I think once we find the right investors that can respond to these things, it's gonna work. And maybe it's not me, but somebody's gonna make it big here in space tourism. And once, sorry, let me finish that. Once you have a club of space tourists, when you have a few hundred people that can afford something like this, and they've had the most incredible experience that money can buy with you, what can you not fund? So it does make sense to do that step first. Also, it's less capital intensive, let's say the launcher.
Tell me, Jose, when are you ready to take those tourists into that perfect overview place?
You see, it's taken me 15 years to get where we are with the company. It may take me another 15 to get there. Or it may never happen. Maybe nobody will do it. Like the only capsule that could take a human properly up there was the Red Bull project, the Red Bull Stratos project with Felix von Gartner. Nobody else has done it again.
Well, the Google guy did.
It wasn't a capsule; it was just a spacesuit. So I'm saying a capsule where there's you could feed people. Recently, Space Perspective did a launch of a really nice prototype. They didn't release much information, so it's hard to tell. But maybe that was a pressurized capsule. So they joined us. We at Zero to Infinity, we flew our first pressurized capsule in 2010, 1 year after founding the company, with only 200,000 euro of investment. No, sorry, 280,000. And we've flown 3 pressurized capsules. One is, you can visit it in the Museum of Mobility in Zaragoza, Spain. It's hanging there from the ceiling. But we haven't flown humans because we don't have the funding to do it. And it's crazy how this stuff gets funded. That doesn't make any sense. But, so we're open to that. And that's been the limiting factor, obtaining enough funding to safely take a person or a couple of people up there. Because the capsule is half built, but yeah.
Where's the problem? I mean, like, from my lay person's perspective, I think it's rather trivial. You have a balloon, you have a capsule, and you follow the laws of physics. So it's as opposed to having those turbo pump
or
challenges
or things like that. Yeah,
of course. Launcher challenges. So what is the problem, and why are investors not knocking on your door on a regular basis?
I've scared investors by talking about too many things. And this is a great example of the podcast. I've been talking from how you can do super heavy launch in a more efficient way and manufacturing in a cheaper way in Europe to taking people up for the view. So investors typically like single-minded people that only have one thing in mind. They say that they like visionary people that have overriding. That's not true. Like they jump on that. Like they don't like visionary people like that. They like people that I'm going to just do one thing. I'm laser focused on that. And so I have the problem that I'm all over the place when I talk, and I talk about lots of things. Of course, in the execution, I have shown that I can be laser focused because we are, as I said, we've flown 3 pressurized prototypes. We have flown a rocket from a balloon. No other company has done it from high altitude ever as a company. There's a bunch of firsts that we've done with extremely little resources, with very, very little resources, a lot less than what it takes to make a PowerPoint for ESA. So in my experience, the investment community follows trends and they have gigantic biases. So we don't quite fit those biases. The things that we say is counterintuitive often. The biases are like, things happen in America first and then they get copied in Europe. And they can't imagine that, hey, maybe somebody from Europe actually came up with the idea first and not the other way around. That breaks some people's brains. Investors, look, I had not made anybody rich before. Like, this was my first startup, and I don't intend to make a second. I mean, I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I just know a little bit about these things, and in part because my dad is an astronomer, and I grew up exposed to aerospace engineering ways of doing things from around the world, and that I got lucky in that sense. But the investors, I don't understand them very well. I don't even understand the ones that invested in my company. Like, we have 40 investors, including VCs and business angels, very smart people that have taken companies public. I don't really know when they invested. Okay. For example, the VCs, I know. The VCs invested because one of their LPs, one of the people that actually invest in the VC fund, because the VCs are not investing their own monies, they are investing other people's money, okay? So if in a couple of cases we had LPs, that's the investors in the fund, investing in Zero to Infinity because they like what we were doing as individuals, they were investing, and because they had invested in the fund, that they made it embarrassing for the fund not to invest themselves. So we know that the fund invested because of out of embarrassment. I don't know.
But don't investors, Jose, once they smell profit, don't they come on board? No questions attached. I mean, like, especially in the United States, if they have they're very sensitive when it comes to profit. And if yours is, where's the problem?
Well, to obtain profit, let's say from flying tourists, you first need to certify the capsules. So you need to get to some hurdles and do a bunch of test flights and build some things that require a minimum amount of team. So you need a bunch of money, and then you can make profits. And of course, the market is there because people are paying a lot of money per minute on black sky view. When you look at Virgin Galactic, 450,000 for 4 minutes. So
150,000.
No, $450,000 for 4 minutes of black sky view.
Wow.
4 minutes. Blue Origin, 5 minutes. The price with Blue Origin is even higher because they do fly and the spaceship comes back in one piece. So Blue Origin, the price is secret. You have to go into an auction and bid on the auction, and typically it could be 5 million to 12 million for 5 minutes. So 1 million per minute.
Wow.
This is the rate. Of course, we can do for a lot less money, okay, for tens of thousands per person, several hours of view, okay? So, of course, it's completely different order of magnitude cost. But the investors, look, we've been super successful at convincing people that they can fundraise with our ideas and just try to do it themselves. So we had a bunch of cases from a supplier in America that signed a non-disclosure agreement with us, but then tried to do it themselves, to people that here in Spain that have signed a fundraising mandate with us. And when they see the funds coming, instead of keeping their commission, they keep the whole chunk. And they tell their investors, oh, yeah, sign this. Send the money to this account. And it's a company that they made last week with 3,000 euro capital, no IP, nothing, and just a website. And the investors, of course, just sign and invest there because and of course, these people are being taken into court, and it's a big scandal here. So that we've managed to convince people that our ideas are good. But at the same time, we've managed to convince people that it won't be us that get the funding to get them done.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally understand. So if money
this could switch anytime. Most people would have given up, but I'm still optimistic. Yeah. So
if money weren't the issue, where's the technology at the moment? How far are you?
Yeah, the technology to fly to both to fly people on balloons commercially to the edge of space where they can have this view has existed for a long time. So we don't need to do any research and development. It's a brick and mortar plan. Money hits the account. In 2 years, we're flying tourists. And in 1 year, we're flying professionals. So there's an intermediate market there. We want to fly the first Moroccan, the first Algerian, the first Palestinian, the first Palestinian-Israeli joint flight, the first North Korean, South Korean joint flight. There are so many low-hanging fruits of firsts that are going to be historical, that are going to, the overview effect is important for you, but also for the group that you represent. The first Spanish woman, we've had a couple of Spanish men. No Spanish woman has had the overview effect, has flown up there. We want to be the first doing that. Germany has like 11 male astronauts and no female astronauts so far. It's insane. We want to make that equal. Okay. So and those are professional flights. Those are flights for research, development, outreach. And those we can do in 1 year from funds being available. So it's really, but the thing is, it's been the case since 2012. Like if in 2012 after we flew a half-size prototype, the one that is in the museum, if back then we had appropriate funding, the company would have started flying tourists in 2014. We would have several bases around the world, and the company would already be doing a lot bigger things. You see, we're not called 0 to 20 kilometers or 0 to 36 kilometers. We're called 0 to infinity because we believe there's a long way of things to do up there that can make economic sense, but we got to go step by step.
So what have you done in the past 10 years? You said you could have been ready. What has happened ever since?
Oh, well, so with many things, but for example, in 2014, we decided to switch to mostly talking about satellite launch. And even because we saw that since 2012 that we flew the half-size vehicle, to 2014, we hadn't raised any money. So we couldn't get to flying humans. And then Virgin Galactic had a terrible accident when one pilot died, the other got severely injured. And that completely dried up the market for us to fundraise. And it didn't matter that we were telling them precisely we are doing something safe. The risks of a rocket are the rocket blowing up or re-entry. We don't have a high-speed re-entry. We don't have a rocket. This gentle. The investment community couldn't care less. Like, it was like, no, you need to talk about something else. And because we had worked and had some preliminary designs, etc., on the satellite launcher, we pivoted. That's the VC community likes to say. So we pivoted to satellite launch. But the reality is that to do the satellite launcher, we had to raise a much, much, much larger amount of money. And that is an amount of money that I wanted to raise from the network of having flown a bunch of space tourists that are influential individuals that can make a few phone calls and you can raise it, But we took that decision and we were even less successful fundraising with the satellite launcher. We raised a few $100,000 and we built a little rocket that we flew from a balloon. We built the first 3D printed metal rocket engine in Europe. And we thought, we are doing some flashy things. We can show investors that we did those flashy new things with very little money. So they can extrapolate and say, if there is more money, how far can you go? But none of those things had any impact at all. And then the company has been, to be completely honest, we've been almost in hibernation since COVID. We have a pipeline of things we can fly. Also, we pivoted back also to what, can we monetize our capabilities? The things that we have already proven to the world that we can do. We can fly something that weighs 100 kilograms, a couple of 100 kilograms on a balloon, then we can get it back. So are there customers for this? Yes, there are a few. So for example, Airbus has been a customer and we've flown many payloads for them. Thales, the Singaporean Ministry of Defense. Like, we have a bunch of customers like this. The problem is those customers are lumpy. For a long time, they don't hire you, and then they hire you for a little test, and then again, nothing, and your capabilities, you need to have them ready. It's not a market like tourists. Okay, we know there's hundreds of thousands of people that can afford it and that would like to do it, and we just tap into that existing large market. Flying things on a balloon for testing, not so large. Like, I'm gonna be working with hopefully soon with doing some astronomy for the Spanish. There's a Spanish Institute of Astronomy in the Canary Islands, and they have some payloads that they want to test. So that will probably be our next flight. But I didn't start a company to fly little telescopes or spy cameras or things like that, because that is not venture scalable. That is something you can do, but it doesn't grow like that dedicated satellite launcher or like space tourism or other such things. So a lot of this time has been just having conversations with investors for nothing, that teach us nothing.
I love your...
Hopefully they teach something, the investors. But
no, it's fantastic. I love your openness and how you're very openly talking about the reality that many are facing. And
100%.
Yeah.
And this is something that I don't understand. I think Elon Musk is the only one that really talks like this. I don't want to compare myself with him in any way, but I see all these companies that are talking to the media with yeah, we're going to fly tourists next month, or we're going to do this. And like, I know that their banks are calling them because the loans are not being paid. Their employees are not being paid. Their suppliers are crazy. Their employees are asking me for a job. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I can't even pay what I have, but I wish I could. Like, there's so much nonsense. And this is the influx of the Silicon Valley style. Like, there's this show, Silicon Valley, that is very good. I haven't watched it all, but I've seen some episodes, and it reflects very well how you have to hype it and fake it until you make it and all this nonsense.
Oversell yourself.
That doesn't work with our space stuff. It shouldn't work. And like, you have to admit when you make mistakes, you have to admit what things cost, because if you don't, then reality comes and bites you in the ass. And I'm sorry that I'm what I can promise to investors is that I'm going to be transparent. I'm not going to tell them, yes, we can do a first human flight with 1 million in the account, because we need 2.5. And with 1, we can just keep doing and whistle in and out.
Maybe then start with a Leica or another animal as the...
we let me tell you about this. We flew robots. Okay. Robots are the new Leica.
Yeah.
And that was my idea. My idea, you see, because I'm pretty familiar with how humans started flying things on balloons and also on rockets, and there were experiments with rats and different things and turtles and things like that. So I bought a mouse. Okay. The company bought a mouse, and in 2010 or so, when we were going to do our first pressurized prototype, and it could have had a mouse inside alive, but my team came back to me and said, "You're crazy. This is okay. That's how things were done in the last century. We're in the 21st century. You don't do that. You put sensors, whatever." So and they said, so I said, I'm going to talk to more savvy people, and everybody said the same thing. You know, there was a guy called Bob Bigelow, who is pretty fascinating. Yes. You should get him on the podcast if you haven't done it yet. So Bob Bigelow has flown a couple of modules of his space station into orbit, and the second flight had cockroaches. And because cockroaches breathe, they generate CO2, you want to see, they're a good model. And usually nobody cares about the life of cockroaches. We walk on them. We have to, by law, kill them in restaurants and places like that. So it didn't work out very well. Okay. People were first saying that it was cruel, it was animal testing. And then they were saying, oh, Bigelow space hotels will have cockroaches. Nobody wants to go to a hotel with cockroaches. So it didn't work out at all. So the mouse that we bought lived a happy life, was our pet. We never flew him, died of old age.
Yeah.
And this is the way. Okay. So, we've flown robots, and there's a cute robot that there's a video of when we flew the Microbloom 2.0 with a cute robot inside the capsule and everything. And now there are humanoid robots full size, and I completely envision flying some of those.
Yeah, but you should
maybe unitary. Yeah.
But Jose, you should hurry up because robots are starting to develop AGI now and starting to get conscious, and then your team will tell you again not to send the robot.
That's a good point. We indeed have to hurry up. And yeah, robots have rights and feelings too. We even looked into flying bacteria because I was obsessed with generating the similar CO2 and water vapor and heat signature of a human. But in the end, we looked into beer. So I settled down
Yeast.
on bacteria from beer, yeast. Yeah. But you need a gigantic tank to compare to a human. So the tank with the water just weighs a lot more. So there is no, we are extremely efficient, in our, as bioreactors.
Yeah. Tell me, Jose, who wants in the industry, like, because you're offering space tourism, but you're also offering near space research on those platforms. So who in research is looking for those places, is looking for the 20 to 50 kilometer range?
Astronomers. You see, I'm going to drop something controversial here, but, you know, the Hubble Space Telescope,
Of course.
So why do you think that was built?
In order to produce fantastic images, of the universe.
No, that was built for profit for Lockheed Martin.
No,
I think it was Lockheed Martin. Yes. So look, the Soviet Union had shipyards, and they built very big submarines, and the Americans wanted images of those shipyards. So they had to figure out how to launch telescopes that were big enough to see the details that they needed to see in those shipyards and other. They needed to see also mostly the military industrial complex of the Soviet Union. They wanted pictures of it. So they generated a bunch of spy satellites, one of which was called the Keyhole, which was very big. And it was what drove the requirements for the shuttle bay. So the space shuttle is made so they can fit a keyhole inside. They ended up being launched on something else. And I know about this from my dad, okay? Indirectly. So I remember they launched the Hubble, and I was like, oh, they're launching this for you, for people like you, for the astronomers. And he's like, no. So there's a company that makes the spy satellites and makes billions with each. And they figured out, oh, we might as well sell an extra one to the government. Instead of saying DOD, the U.S. Air Force, whatever, it's going to say NASA or it's a National Reconnaissance, I don't know, whatever. So, we sell one for civilian purposes. Instead of looking down, it can look up.
That's
that's where Hubble comes from. That's where the Hubble comes from. Okay. And they didn't even change the optics properly. And that's wonderful for the maker because they get an extra contract to go and put glasses on it. That's how the taxpayer is being mistreated by the aerospace sector. So now going back to your original question about who wants to fly things on balloons for science. Well, just like our human eyes see black and it doesn't get blacker if you fly higher, you don't need to be in low Earth orbit to look at the universe in the visible spectrum. You can look at it from 40 kilometers just fine, or 36. And the limiting factors for Hubble is not the air, of course, because there's not much, but it's the day-night cycle and the problems of getting hot and getting warm and getting hot and getting warm. And that, well, at high altitude on the South Pole, you're very cold in the winter, in the South winter. And that's great to be cold. You want to be as cold as you can if you want to measure photons. So for a tiny fraction of the cost of Hubble, we could have been flying telescopes on the North and South Poles in the winter that could be gigantic, hanging from balloons. And we would already know if there are other civilizations on exoplanets decades ago for a tiny fraction of the cost of Hubble. Like the way we do astronomy, it's not because it's the best for the astronomers. It's what makes profit to the companies that sell stuff to the governments and blah, blah, blah. So you can do astronomy with high altitude balloons in an incredibly more cost effective way than in low Earth orbit.
So do you talk to ESA about stuff like that?
No. Let's talk about ESA for a second. My first employer was ESA. I was working with a wonderful boss who was the first non-American to fly on the shuttle. Incredibly cool dude, German guy, Ulf Merbold, Dr. Ulf Merbold. So it was a wonderful privilege to work there with so many talented people and with such a cool boss. And I got to do parabolic zero gravity flights at the end of my time there. So it's great to work at ESA. But ESA really, it was for me, but ESA, you need to ask always yourself, who's the customer? Who's the customer of ESA? Of course, it's not the taxpayer in the member states. It's the national delegations. Those are the ones that approve the budgets. The national delegations of each state. So it doesn't matter if I convince Aschbacher, the head of ESA, about anything, because he has no power. Because the power is in the customers, the ones that pay the bills, which are the national delegations. And the national delegations, they themselves answer to the politicians of the member states, which they themselves answer to the people that can put the politicians in hot water, which are typically the industrialists that can say, if you don't keep sending me 40 million euro a year, I'm going to have to cut and I'm going to have to lay off people, and it's going to look back. That is the driving force, not to lay off people in the member states. It's not anything else. So, of course, I can explain to ESA how we can identify exoplanets and see if they have habitable atmospheres with a coronagraph in the South Pole on a balloon. And the individuals at ESA are going to love it. And they're going to say, I wish I could do this. Just like the venture capital people in La Caixa, one of my VCs, they loved it that they got to invest in my company and they could be in my meetings, and they really loved what we were doing. But what made it possible for them to do it was that the LP, that their stakeholder, made embarrassing for the entity not to do it. So, convincing the people at NASA or a place or ESA or these kinds of things, it's not very helpful because they don't have any power. Okay, so
that's interesting. You have
that's not really how it works.
You have distributed authority, so you don't have the central figure as you mentioned at ESA. So you have a distributed system of authority.
Correct.
So who would you call if you wanted that money? And that gets difficult.
I'm going to tell you what has worked for me. Zero to Infinity has received 45,000 euro of ESA money. How did that happen? OHB is a very large company in Germany, very successful. So I was trying to convince the leadership team of OHB, including Marco Fuchs, about the beauty of developing a balloon-assisted launcher. It wasn't just elegant, it also was different from what other people were doing. And specifically for Germany, it wasn't offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And Germany was the cradle of offensive rocketry.
Mm-hmm.
And now is making ICBMs again with ESA and RFA. And some people are getting very upset about that. Okay? But if we build something that is not an ICBM, then it doesn't get those kinds of problems. Okay? And Marco Fuchs got it. He got it. He could see how that could fit in his dad's, who passed away, vision.
Mm-hmm.
But his team had the pet project of building RFA, Rocket Factory Export.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they had been fantasizing about this, and they had been thinking of who they were going to hire, and they didn't like the fact that some unknown Spanish dude was coming here with an Austrian and a Frenchman and a Greek guy trying to persuade everybody of doing things a different way. So in the end, what happened was that there was something called the micro launcher study that was commissioned by ESA, and this put some money in some countries, the countries that were paying themselves for the micro launcher study. The biggest chunk went to Germany, to OHB. And then in Germany, OHB gave us 45,000, gave Dassault System another 40 something, and then internally to the MT Aerospace people, the money to do the first mission design for what became RFA. Okay. So we could get money because there was a big player, Marco Fuchs and his team at OHB, that said, we're going to give you some of these because we are still considering you. The moment that they dropped Dassault and us, they just concentrated on the thing, we stopped getting money. But we had to create a subsidiary in Munich. It's still out there. It's a drone, no people inside, but it still exists. Zero to Infinity Deutschland GmbH, sitting there in Munich doing nothing. So that's how we got money from ESA. We were told
through industry partners.
Through an industry partner that could make the phone calls in Germany to make it embarrassing for Germany. So we didn't have a partner like that in Spain. And when you look at who gets funding, it's always something like that. Of course, nobody explains it like this. They say because we're so innovative or whatever. I don't know. And I'm going to tell you another story with ESA. And this is something that it's never been explained in public. Do you remember ExoMars?
Of course.
So it had a lander called Schiaparelli, I think, that crashed on Mars. Yeah. So my father had instruments on ExoMars, on the orbiter, not on the lander. And I was following very, very closely the mission because I like interplanetary missions. That's what my dad does. And it's very cool. It's one of the coolest things that we do, in humanity, to explore other celestial bodies with, So I was very familiar with Huygens. Huygens Huygens was a probe that landed on Titan, which is a moon of Saturn. I was there at the launch, on the launch pad in Kennedy Space Center with my dad and this wonderful team of Huygens and Cassini scientists from all around the world. So Huygens landed on Titan. And how did they test Huygens? They tested on Earth on a balloon, okay? And that was launched from Spain. And my dad was involved with that. So I had some exposure to when you want to land on some planetary body and you have some complicated thing with parachutes and sensors and stuff that needs to work, you want to do the closest that you can. And landing on Mars is very similar to falling through the atmosphere at 30 kilometers of altitude, because about that altitude is the density of the air and the temperature of the air on Earth is similar to what you face on the atmosphere of Mars. So it does make a lot of sense to test these things on the Earth first, both to test the software and the hardware and the mechanisms and the thermal stuff, all those things. So I knew that ExoMars had parachutes and was supposed to land. And so I found out who was the mission manager for this one. It was a Canadian dude with lots of rings in his hands. And I bought myself a ticket and went to meet him in Aztec. And he said, look, we're the only company there space agencies, like the French space agency, but we're the only company in Europe that has flown and recovered heavy, high-altitude balloon payloads. We would love to test a mock-up of the thing and with the parachutes and everything. And he said, "Oh no, we are doing this in Romania, and we're doing this with these guys of ARCA." And I said, why are you doing it with them? What's their track record? Have they ever done something like this? No, but and say Romania is not even a member state. What is this all about? Oh, but they signed some sort of agreement to get close, and one of the conditions was that the contract had to go to their friends at ARCA. And I said, okay, you give their contract whatever, just let us do it. You don't even have to pay us. We'll do it for free. To do it properly, it's €500,000. That's what doing it really, really well costs. But I'm willing, out of the goodness of my heart, because I want to work with ESA, because I lived here in Aztec. I used to go to the tanning beds. Oh, they removed them, but they had tanning beds at Aztec for free for the staff. I used to swim there. I didn't play golf in the 9th golf course because I never played golf in my life. But some people did play golf in Aztec in the 9th. So I have fond memories. The food was great. I would like to start working with you guys. And they said, no, we don't have a mechanism for this. We don't have a mechanism to give you the thing so you'd fly it on your own dime. And then I went to the Spanish delegation, CDTI, and said, please, let me fly this so it doesn't crash on Mars. Because I don't want it to crash. And I want to say that I was part of Mars Express. And how are we going to do it? That's not your problem, but I'll explain you. We have other customers. They have their payload. We buy a bigger balloon, we put a little bit more helium, and we do a tandem launch. So one mission does its thing, and the other mission is a drop test. And it's doable. There is, like, you put some pyrocutters. It's not very complicated. We can do these things. And Spain was giving over 40 million for this mission. So, and I was asking for half. Then I was like, I'll do it for free. Well, the freaking thing crashed on Mars because it was never tested. What happened to the €800,000 that went to the Romanians? They left the country and they moved to the US. They just run with the money. Of course, I have many good Romanian friends. Not all Romania is like that at all. It's very interesting what's happening there electorally also, recently. But there's incredibly talented Romanian folks, and those were not the ones that got the money. Okay. So now they moved to New Mexico, and now they live in New Mexico. They even got to prison there. There was a fraud case. It's a long story with ARCA. That's what happened with ESA, and of course, no journalist wants to talk about this. Because they say that it was a software error. Come on, you catch software errors when you do testing. If you don't test, you don't catch them.
Tell me, Jose, a personal question: do you feel disillusioned?
Not at all. Not at all. That might be the impression. Like you say, oh, you're so jaded. You've had through. No. I feel the same passion to do things right. I want to learn and live in base reality. I don't want to live in some fantasy, in some hype. So I'm here, and I'm as passionate as ever. I just want to learn from my mistakes and not necessarily step on the same stone twice, And if I can help other entrepreneurs or other people, get a more truthful, perception of reality and space, I'm all for that. I've done it for my students. I've done it for my employees. Some of them have become extremely successful entrepreneurs on their own after they left the company. So I want to strike conversations because there haven't been any. Because here in Europe, there's no conversation. It's like, we used to do things that were very cool, and now we just buy services from the US. That's kind of what it is. Like that's not the Europe I want for my kids. Absolutely not. So no, I feel I get up energized to stuff every day.
To get things done.
To get things done, because what I do is meaningful.
Yeah. Because if the call came right now, and someone offered you a place, a spot on a spacecraft that's going into orbit with even someone offered you some money to put up one of your balloons and then launch from the balloon to go toward the moon or even further, would you go as a person?
If it has windows, yes. Not if it has no windows.
But you would go.
Yeah. I would have to check the reliability and so on, you know.
And your kids, if your kids agree.
I really want to show that we live on a planet to all sorts of people.
Yeah.
To my kids. Like there's a guy you can't interview him because he's dead, but I exchanged some emails with him. My dad know him. His name was Audouin Dollfus. Mm-hmm. So he's a Frenchman, incredible astronomer, and he built himself a capsule to go higher than any plane in Europe to point instruments to Venus and Mars and figure out things like why Mars is red.
Wow.
That there is water ice on the poles of Mars.
Wow.
There's water vapor in the atmosphere of Venus. And he did that from Europe, from France. Everybody says, oh, France, you can't do nothing, 35-hour week, whatever. Well, in their spirit, they had that in their blood. They had that in their culture. Yeah. They will do it again, just like Audouin Dollfus did it. And I remember when I started the company, I said, I would have loved him to go back in a more comfortable cabin to see this same view that he had. And you should put it in the footnotes, if there are any, of the call. You see that there are incredible pictures of his capsule. Instead of having a big balloon like the Soviets or the Polish or the Swiss were doing back then, he had a bunch of little balloons, hundreds.
Yeah.
Like in the movie Up.
Yes.
And so those kinds of things used to happen here, and they should happen again.
Absolutely. I was asking that question about going into space because this is one of the questions I keep asking each of my guests on the show. Because if you go further out, things are exciting, but they soon wear off and can get boring if you're traveling for 7 months to Mars, for example. So my question to you would be, what's the one piece of music you would want to put on a playlist to entertain you throughout that boring journey? The one piece. And we do have a playlist for the aspiring space traveler on Spotify. And now you get to add your contribution. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to think about space. It doesn't necessarily relate to space. So whatever music entertains you.
It's gonna be related. You know, it's a band that I saw just yesterday on a concert. The band is called Public Service Broadcasting.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with them?
Now, are they progressive rock music?
No. So the song, I think, is the best space theme song ever. And I actually tweeted about this today. Wow. If you go to JMLU77, you can find my tweet with the video so the song is called Go. So what they did was they took the recordings from Mission Control on Apollo 11.
Wow. And
they made a song out of that.
Wow.
So you hear Fido, go, guidance, go.
Turn that into a song.
And they turn that into a song, and it's incredible. And these guys, they make, albums that have a theme. So it could be the conquest of space.
Yes.
So they also have a very funky song that is called Gagarin. And it's amazing. It's like you can't stop moving. So these guys are not very well known. They're British, but the latest album is about Amelia Earhart's flight.
Fantastic.
It's called The Last Flight, and it's so poetic and so evocative. They're great. So I would include Go in the playlist for sure by Public Service Broadcasting.
I will totally put that up. Thank you so much for that. My last question to you, Jose. This place is a coffee place. It's called the Space Cafe Podcast. And in coffee places, you now and then have yourself an espresso to energize yourself when you are tired. Now, I challenge you to share an espresso for the mind with me and the audiences, something that energizes our minds, whatever kind of thought you deem appropriate for that.
Find what makes life not pointless. Like a lot of people sometimes struggle in the world of today with the meaning of their lives, so figure out what makes life not pointless, whatever that is to you.
Love it.
And you can extract
Love it.
Unlimited energy from that.
Yeah, fantastic.
And isn't that what religions were all about?
Fantastic. Jose, thank you so much for taking the time. This was really, really interesting.
Thank you. Likewise. Enjoy it.
And that is a wrap, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. If this episode was as inspiring to you as it was to me recording it, consider sharing it with someone you feel like is a nerd just like you, or you feel like a person who would appreciate this kind of inspiration that you're taking inspiration from. Maybe it could be a nice gift for the holiday season in full swing at the moment. And if there's still a little time left, I know I'm repeating myself, but again, this would help quite a bit to make this show or help this show grow into where we all want it to grow into, a huge place or one of the places for profound discussion about one of the most fascinating endeavors humanity has ever undertaken. So if you feel like you have 10 seconds or so, consider giving us a rating on whatever platform you are on, you're listening to this one, or even a review. We would highly appreciate that. Until next time, my friends, stay inspired and keep reaching for the stars and stay curious. Above all, this is Marcus signing off from the Space Cafe podcast. Bye-bye.